So one thing I want to point out too is that in the millennial group, because it's such a huge demographic of, say, 18 to 44-year-olds in this particular case for this research study, one of the things we found that's remarkably different, not only by sometimes looking at by gender, is mostly by age groups. Because you start looking at 40 to 44-year-olds, which is the oldest demographic, and their lifestyle choices and the things they do and why they do these things is very different from the 18 to 30-year-olds and why they choose to do different things. So we've seen that there's a generation gap within the generation, sometimes even 2 generation gaps. And we call it a generation gap because their responses are so incredibly different from people who are only 10, maybe 15, 20 years younger than them, that it's remarkable and it's something to look at and to note, especially when it comes to things like technology and their communication and consumption patterns.
Can I ask you a question just out of curiosity that relates a little bit? I know that research has shown for a long time that after around age 35, people tend not to discover or acquire tastes in any music.
Mm-hmm.
Does that break down within millennials? Do you know? Like, do they still adhere to that kind of basic kind of thing?
The only difference is sometimes they might be open-minded to their kids' music. So then that's a different thing. They might get into a different kind of musical genre because their kids are into something different. But not always. It depends on how open-minded that person is sort of from the beginning. It's funny. We study youth culture, but the reality is youth culture could be a 50-year-old or a 60-year-old sometimes too. It's somebody who is open-minded and what we call sees with the eyes of new. They see things in a new way often. They might explore different things or try new things and aren't necessarily set in the ways that they do things. So some people that that are icons in different industries like technology, especially music, even new sporting industries. Some of these leaders can be in their 40s, 50s, 60s, but they saw where things were going and they tried something new and they created an entire culture around that. And they easily can be considered part of, youth culture movement, even though their age happens to be a lot older than the people that are actually doing it. We've seen this reinvention too often with like Levi's, like in fashion. Some of these iconic brands that have been around forever, they invented denim, some of these brands can reinvent themselves, and it's interesting to see how they do it. They look at the past, but they look at the future too, and they pull these different pieces together and are able to conceptualize a new way of thinking for the marketplace that's coming into it. And then that marketplace thinks it's theirs, thinks it's their own. They may not even know of what the past was for Levi's, but that particular brand to them is something that they associate with their own lifestyle. We see this, for example, another great example is Converse sneakers. A lot of people didn't even know that they were meant for basketball. It's quintessential shoe for casualness or for going to a festival or going to an event. And so these things that were iconic and built for one thing are now used in a very different way. So this millennial culture also can easily take something that was built for one reason and flip it on its head and use it for another. Mobile phone culture is a great example, using your phone way more for texting than for actually making a phone call, which is considered long and laborious and not private. So that's really flipped the electronic industry too, in terms of how some people are taking these different elements, making them their own and using them for things that they weren't originally actually even made for.
That's interesting. Sounds good.
Well, I'm starting. I feel really good. I'm starting to look at the next.
51.1% say I prefer to spend on both experiences and owning things. When you talk about the future-ready experiencers that we're talking about with the movement, they flip that, and the number one thing they want to spend on is experiences.
Okay, yeah, I agree. Let's
so you might be able to skip it.
Okay. The next, there's a lot that's on the next slide.
These are the main lifestyle cultures.
I would either want